desire for one particular object may be conquered, but as to its desire for having some one object or other, this is unconquerable. And this is the beautiful part. It is not enough then to argue the folly of an existing affection. It is not enough to make good the evanescence of its object. It would appear as if the alone powerful engine of dispossession were to bring the mastery of another affection to bear upon it. You must seek every legitimate method of finding access to the heart for the love of him who is greater than the world. And I think our students know, right? They know that every other beauty in life has let them down. But I think it's our job to show them there is one, right? There's one that won't. In fact, one beauty that doesn't just call you beautiful, but that was willing to become ugly, that you might be a beauty in God's eyes. Right? And I think once that comes alive for our students, a few things will happen. First, they'll stop pleasing themselves. Right? It's just a drop in the bucket. Right? These things of pleasure, their affections have shifted. They love God more than these other things. And the grip of hedonism will lose its power, and the kids will no longer ask, how can I? Because they want to. But secondly, they'll start to please God because he's beautiful, right? Because he's great, because he's awesome, because he's captured their heart, not because they're trying to save themselves. And they'll actually, we'll talk a little bit about this more later, but they'll actually, it's kind of counterintuitive, but they'll actually begin to do more, do better. Right? You stop saying do more, do better, and they actually start doing more and do better. Just think about anything in your life right, that you think is beautiful, that you think is valuable, that you think is awesome. You want to do everything that you can, right, for that thing. It's going to be the same with our students. I had a student right before he went off to college, and he was a kid, man, 3 years, he made me want to tear out my hair every single time I saw him. Right? He was a kid lost. Literally, I was like, God, this kid's a lost cause. I know, God, that you raise people from the dead, but not this one. Right? It was one of those guys, and I think God humbled me and showed me that he can change anybody. Right? And I remember before we went off to college, I took him out to a movie, this kid out to a movie. We saw Transformers, and then I took him to eat a sandwich, right? And the sandwich was horrible, so it was kind of a nice way to end it. We were like watching a movie together, and then we joked about how bad the sandwich was, and that was kind of like the depth of our relationship. Right? He came to me, but it was more like, I don't know, he was a funny kid. But anyway, we're eating this bad sandwich after a movie, and we're talking. And this was a kid who I know from probably freshman or sophomore year onwards. He was going out drinking Friday nights, right? He was partying, this, that, and the other thing. And I remember he sat me down, and this kid was a really bright kid. He said, I didn't think I would ever say this, but he said, I'm about to head off to college. And he's like, I know what I can be doing. Right? He's like, I'm not dumb. I know what's waiting for me. And he says, but I don't know if I want to do that right anymore. And so he actually sat me down. He called me probably like 2 weeks into the semester and complained to me again about how all the churches down where he was sucked. But he was like, hey, Dave, can you help me find a church around this area? I really want to start getting involved. And I think first of all, that really humbled me, right? He was a kid. I'm like, this kid's a lost cause. Right? Second of all, I'm like, this is so like you, God, right? The second that I see some fruit, you take him away. Right? He leaves. But most importantly, I think what I saw with him is something had shifted. Some affection had changed. And I could have told him till I was blue in the face, man, you shouldn't go partying on Friday nights. In fact, I did. I said, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, right? You know where that's going to lead. You know it ultimately is going to break you, right? Didn't matter. But when something changed for him, when he caught sight of beauty, he did more, he did better. So that's understanding youth culture in general. Let's move on very quickly into understanding Asian American youth culture specifically. Here's a condition. Okay, first condition. First is a performance-driven mentality, right? I'm sure you guys know. In fact, here, this is not just youth culture. This is like our culture, right? This is like us. This is you and I. So, if you've grown up with a Korean mom, right, you know that our culture is very heavily based on shame, right? In fact, my mom would, she would always say, right, and I'm sure your mom has said this, when you've done something wrong to scold you, instead of saying anything bad, she just says, "내 잘못이야," right? Which it's my fault. It's my fault that I didn't raise you better. And you're like, oh gosh, Mom, I wish you just would have spanked me or yelled at me. That's worse, right? Shame-based culture. And our students are told, right, constantly, you have to measure up. You have to measure up. Don't misbehave. Why? Because if you misbehave, that means I'm a bad parent, right? That's what their parents tell them, right? Very, very performance-driven, even in their relationship with their parents. And so most of our kids, they're not really quite sure if their parents actually love them. Right? Always asked to crank out production. Even when they measure up, even when they do well, it's not quite good enough. I remember one time I brought home a report card, and I'm not trying to brag. I'm trying to make a point. Okay, I had straight A's and one A minus. This is my freshman year. I distinctly remember geometry. Geometry killed me. I don't know, shapes. I don't know. Anyway, so I had an A minus in geometry, and I brought my report card home, and I showed it to my mom, and she's like, "Oh, good. You did really, really good." But what's that line next to your A? Right? I'm a freshman, right? I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah, did like the typewriter have a glitch? Did it like go crazy, kind of do something weird? What's that line next to your A? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I look at the geometry, and I'm like, Mom, that's an A minus. And she's like dumbfounded, right? She's like, minus? Abe never got an A minus? I don't know. And her head was like going to explode. It was like those like robots. So she said, what's an A minus? I don't understand. And I knew my mom meant well, right? She didn't mean to crush my soul, right? Saying to me, oh, but that's good, but I know you can do better. But really what I heard was it's not really quite up to standard. It's not good enough. Not only are we not quite sure if our mom loves us, we're not even really sure if our dad likes us. Right? I know with me, when I was growing up, it got a little bit better when my dad became a Christian. But when I was growing up, the only interaction I had with my father was he loved sports and so did I. So we would play sports together when I was little. My brother was kind of a rock when he was little. He's a great athlete now, but he was afraid of the water and afraid of slides. So my father's like, finally a son who likes sports. So he would play sports with me. But the only time he would actually talk to me is when I was getting spanked, right? So I associated the voice of my father with 멍덩이, right? I associated it with beating, right? And for many of our kids, I know a lot of our parents these days are a little more progressive, but a lot of our kids, their parents aren't. That's their experience. And so what guys do, right? What do? They try to live up to their father, their mother's expectations. They fail, and so what do? They get angry. Angry yellow man, right? That's my syndrome. I have the syndrome. You get angry. Girls, you're stronger than we are. You're the stronger gender, right? You're better than us. So you don't get angry. You don't give up so easily. So you keep trying and you keep trying and you keep trying, and then you get really, really insecure. Right? And that's what happens with most of our students. They're living in this constant performance-based mentality. Even at school, I want to be cool. Will my friends accept me? At home, will my parents think I'm good enough? Will my teachers think I'm smart? Will my coaches think that I'm good? And of course, because this is the life that they live, it transfers into their spiritual walks, and they have a works-based relationship with God. The second condition is a relationship-driven reality. Right? Our Korean American families are what I call family of pieces. Right? It's very, very fragmented. Some of our students, a lot of our students, their parents work half of the day. And they come home, right, and their dads, what do? They take off all their clothes besides their nandengu and underwear, right? They sit in front of the TV, they watch Korean news or read Korean newspaper, and they eat ramyun until it fogs up their glasses, right? That's what their dads do. And for most of our students, right, they have no kind of existing relationship with their parents. Right? To make it worse, they can't talk to him because, well, I know some kids, their parents can, but their English isn't good. Their culture is utterly different. They can't relate to them. So they can't talk to them because they can't speak English, right? And they can't speak Korean. They can't relate to them because their cultures are so different. No sense of meaningful relationship or conversation. In fact, when I call my mom on Sunday nights, this phone conversation sound exactly the same. That's me. And what my mom is doing is, she's a good Presbyterian, so she always tells me about three things, right, whenever we talk on the phone. And so she goes to them in cycles. So let's say she's saying, oh, don't forget to renew your passport, which she did this week, right? Don't forget to get your flu shot, which I didn't do, right? and don't forget to call your brother. And then she'll start over. Hey, do you remember your passport? And I'm like, And so she'll go around in circles, and